So I'm going to ask you all a very personal question first, and I hope you honestly answer me. Could we have a show of hands? Who here has ever felt lazy? Okay, no surprises there. What you may not know is that a condition called Motivational Deficiency disorder was discovered several years ago. It affects 1 in 5 people, and most of them don't know they have it. Now, some of you know I'm a sufferer of motivational deficiency disorder. Symptoms can include not being able to get off the beach, feelings of being trapped on the couch. Many of you I can see recognise. In severe forms, the condition can cause you to lose your job, your relationship, and you end up with a very messy house. But I was lucky enough to be diagnosed early by Professor Argos, a senior neurologist who discovered the condition Motivational Deficiency disorder.
The condition varies from very mild. There are people who perhaps notice a slight reluctance to get out of bed on Monday morning at the mild end of the spectrum, through to the most severe disease, which is potentially fatal. These are people who find themselves at times in an acute attack unmotivated to breathe, and these people will die.
All my life, people have been calling me lazy. Now we know I was sick. And the best news of all is this. In dollar band name Strivor, which has shown extraordinary results in clinical trials run by Professor Argos.
The effectiveness that we've seen in the trials has at times been quite remarkable. I had recently the wife of one of our participants ring me, and she was in tears. She was in tears at the extraordinary change in the behaviour of her husband. She reported that after the use of Indolabant, her husband had mowed the lawn, repaired the gutters, and then paid an electricity bill, all in the 1 week. This was such an extraordinary change in his behaviour that she was overcome.
Now, working with the company that markets Strivor, Professor Argos has very kindly produced a very short questionnaire that I want you all to take now. Have you ever felt lazy? Do you have a family history of laziness? Have you ever considered hiring someone to clean your gutters? Considered. And are you breathing? Now, if you answered yes to any of those questions, you may have motivational deficiency disorder. Now, that is the end of the gag. And it has a very serious underpinning. And the very serious underpinning is that the microphone may be too close to my mouth. The very serious underpinning here is that we are turning the worried well into the worried sick. Too many people are becoming patients. We are over-medicalising, over-diagnosing, and over-treating. And too much medicine is being increasingly acknowledged as a major threat to human health. Not just because of the harm it causes, but because of the resources that could have been spent treating or preventing genuine illness. Within the most senior ranks of the medical establishment worldwide, there is growing unease that we are having too much of a good thing. The British Medical Journal, where I write, where many others write, dates back to 1840. That journal has just launched a new campaign called Too Much Medicine. Things are changing. There's a sense of change coming within the medical establishment about this problem. We need to be all much more sceptical, not just about the drugs and the diagnostic tests and the operations, but about the diagnostic labels that we seem to embrace so readily for ourselves and our loved ones. As a colleague of mine, Ray Thomas, told me recently, if we give a small child, the label of ADHD, we change that child's personal narrative for the rest of their life, for better or for worse. This is a big problem. There are things we can do, and we'll get to that. I'd like to give a few quick examples of this, the broadening of disease definitions, the medicalisation of ordinary life. Perhaps the best one, the most recent one, is the creation of a condition called female sexual dysfunction. And this is serious, this is not a joke. Clearly, a small cohort of women and men suffer sexual dysfunction so severe, a medical label and treatment may be warranted. But what we have is people claiming in the world's most reputable journals that 43% of women suffer from female sexual dysfunction. Now, of course, some of you might have smelled a rat already. The drug companies are an active player in this debate. And what I discovered in writing Sex, Lies and Pharmaceuticals, which is a meticulous documentation of the creation of this new condition, the drug companies weren't just sponsoring the science, they were actively helping to construct the science of this new condition. And I know you don't believe me because I'm a journalist, but I'm just going to show you a few bits of evidence here. In 1997, when a whole group of experts came together to start defining female sexual dysfunction, they met at a meeting in Cape Cod. Now, a leaked email from the person organising that meeting said the entire conference was funded by drug companies, and half of the people going to the conference were drug company representatives. In 1998, the next year, 19 experts got together and wrote this definition of female sexual dysfunction. 18 of the 19 disclosed financial ties to drug companies. Perhaps one of the most chilling things, though, is when the drug companies helped to design the very diagnostic tests to test whether you have the condition that they want to sell pills for. And this is exactly what's happened with female sexual dysfunction. This is one of my favourite examples here. This was a test, a very short questionnaire, very much like the one we just did for motivational deficiency disorder. And this is a press release advertising this test. The test enables clinicians who are not necessarily experts in female sexual dysfunction to diagnose the condition with high accuracy in a few minutes. And this is serious, this is not fiction. In a few minutes, a woman could walk out of a doctor's surgery having had this test, in inverted commas, and come out with a diagnostic label that could change her sexuality for the rest of her life. Sadly for the drug company that designed this test, they didn't get their drug approved. It was so appalling, it was barely any better than a placebo and it had shocking side effects. It was rejected and they've abandoned it since. But this story has not finished. As soon as a drug is approved for female sexual dysfunction in the United States, there'll be a tsunami of marketing that will affect every corner of the globe. Female sexual dysfunction is an example of creating a new condition. What happens much more commonly is that old conditions are expanded. Take high blood pressure, a very important risk factor for future heart attack or stroke. But if you look at the definitions of high blood pressure over the last few decades, you find that they have been progressively lowered. So now we have 1/3 of Americans being defined as having high blood pressure. In 2003, a new step forward was made in this definition. Experts got together and created pre-high blood pressure, or pre-hypertension as it's called. Now they said it wasn't a disease and it didn't need to be treated with drugs, but other critics immediately said this is a non-disease, it scares people, and it's about building markets for drug companies. 9 of the 11 experts on that expert committee disclosed multiple ties to drug companies. On average, 12 drug companies each. They were researchers, they were speakers, and they were consultants. The entanglement between the drug industry and the medical profession is extraordinary, and it reaches to those very committees that are defining the diseases that we all suffer from. So it's also part of a new trend to create pre-diseases. We now have pre-diabetes, we have pre-osteoporosis, and we have pre-dementia is the next one. And people in their 50s can suffer from pre-dementia. And it was first identified, I think, in 2011, 2010, pre-dementia, what was I saying? That is a very bad gag, and it is in no way meant to undermine the legitimacy of dementia. The problem with creating all the preconditions is that money and resources and attention starts to flow to the worried well, not to the legitimately ill. This is a huge problem. Now, the pharmaceutical industry is not the only culprit here. They are one of the forces driving the medicalisation of life, but they are not the only one. The medical profession itself, specialist groups, are very keen to expand their turf. The fear of legal action is another thing that often drives unnecessary testing and treatment. The incentives within healthcare systems often drive excess. If you pay people to do more, they will do more. Technological change itself is one of the biggest drivers. We have sophisticated new diagnostic technology offering tremendous benefits, but it can see smaller and smaller abnormalities, which mean less and less to us. This is a huge problem. And culturally, we have a deep faith in early detection. It makes intuitive sense to nip it in the bud. But early detection is a double-edged sword. Now, one of the best examples here is breast cancer screening. The current evidence suggests that breast cancer screening does more good than harm. It saves lives. But one of the harms of breast cancer screening, which is being increasingly recognised but is little known among the public yet, is overdiagnosis. A big report was done in the UK last year, the United Kingdom, published in The Lancet, estimating that perhaps 1 in 5 cancers that are diagnosed via screening may be overdiagnosis. In other words, they would never have gone on to harm the woman. A report in the New England Journal of Medicine soon after suggested the figure could be 30%, which is in line with Australian data. Other estimates put it much lower at 5%. We don't know yet. There's ongoing debate, and we don't know yet which women have the cancers that won't go on to harm and which won't. There is lots of research going on in this, not just breast cancer, thyroid cancer, prostate cancer, asthma, ADHD, chronic kidney disease. There is evidence of varying degrees within many conditions about the extent of overdiagnosis. And there's a lot of scientific work going on in this area. Now, this presentation has got a lot too serious, and that's because we're missing one of the key ingredients of medical education. And so I thought that it was appropriate at this point to let you know, and I knew this would happen. I even practiced. This is what we're missing. Is a good old-fashioned whining and dining. And if anyone would like to join me later, that would be fine. The drug companies in Australia sponsor 30,000 events every year for doctors and other health professionals. 30,000 around that in this quite small population. Hundreds every week. And that is where your professionals are learning not only about the latest drug, but about the diseases that go with them. And as it happens, we know the names of the restaurants because the drug companies are forced to disclose them by law in Australia. We don't yet know the names of the doctors, but we will soon because transparency reforms that many of us have been pushing for are finally coming. So cheers to that. Thank you. I didn't anticipate that applause. It's thrown me. We are lucky enough to have some secret footage taken at one of these whining and dining events where Dr. Argos was actually educating your GPs.
Our research identified the agent indolobant by our experiments with experimental animals. Firstly, in the large animal, the sloth, we found that indolobant, now known as Strivor around the world, Strivor, is particularly effective at reversing the effects of motivational deficiency disorder. You've seen nothing until you've seen a sloth that's motivated.
Now, Professor Argos, all the drugs that he prescribes, all the operations, all the diagnostic tests, all the hospitals, all the specialists, the package of modern medicine offers tremendous benefit. And this is the key caveat from this talk that I want you to take away. This is not about the problem with medicine itself. It's about the problem of too much medicine, because that takes resources from treating or preventing legitimate illness. Now, just to finish off, there are many things we can all do about this problem. It's not one of those problems you go away and you feel, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed, there's nothing we can do. There are many things we can do in whatever walk of life you're in. At a personal level, we can become much more sceptical about those diagnostic labels that are handed out like lollies and which we seem to embrace for ourselves, for our children, for our elderly parents. We can seek out more independent information. It's hard to find, but we can look for it harder and not settle for the kind of marketing or a lot of the inferior information that we find on the web. Groups like the Cochrane collaboration produce good summaries of evidence about what works and what doesn't. They're just one example. We can seek out more independent health professionals, people who don't see the sexy drug reps, who don't go to the whining and dining. In hospitals, there are groups of doctors saying no more drug reps on this campus. If you are a health professional, you can become more independent, and many of them already are. And if you're lucky enough to be a manager that runs a health system somewhere in the world, then there's plenty you can do to clean up some of these corrupt relationships, to look at the drivers of excess, to look at what's driving overdiagnosis and overtreatment, and start to bring some real change. And just finally, for any of you out there who are actually highly motivated, who've clearly been taking your Strivor, you can actually set up campaigns specifically to criticise the medicalisation of life. As has happened in America, Dr. Leonor Tiefer and a group of feminist colleagues and academics set up a campaign to expose the medicalisation of female sexual difficulties. It's called The New View. It's been very successful. And there's a lot to do in that respect. Some kind of big change may be coming in medicine. There may be some sort of shift coming. And my favourite strategies, if we're talking about change, are humility, humour, and hope. And that's why I keep taking the Strivor. Thank you.